In today's video, we're going to be looking at sustaining a heavenly gaze in prayer, and specifically, I'm referring to group prayer. When we begin praying together, there's almost this flow of the Spirit that begins to develop, and I want to talk a little bit about what's going on with that and about some of the challenges of sustaining that continued upward momentum. So let's start out with the foundation here. I want to introduce what I mean by this flow state of prayer. Now, I got this quote from Cigna Healthcare, and this is how they talk about the flow state in regards to more of a psychological or performance-oriented type of definition. Flow state is a positive mental state experienced when you're completely absorbed, focused, and involved in an activity. Time passes without you noticing, and you're free from distraction, boredom, and self-consciousness. Now, I like to maybe take a little bit of what they're saying from this purely secular productivity type of mindset, and I want to shift that into this spiritual dynamic of prayer, because I've actually experienced similar to what they're talking about in times alone with God and in times when I'm praying together with others in a group. And the only way I can describe it is it's almost like you become caught up in something different. It's like when Jesus prayed, your kingdom come, your will be done. It's like the kingdom is here in a more tangible way where you can really sense the presence of God. And there's almost this full absorption that you and the group are experiencing in the presence of God as we're communicating and communing with Him. So now, since we've laid that foundation of what I mean by this flow state of prayer, I want to talk about the challenge of maintaining and sustaining this heavenly gaze, particularly as a group. And what I've found is that when a group gets together and prays, oftentimes as people are praying and our attention is directed upward towards God, we're connecting with the Holy Spirit, there is this tendency for us to go from this conversation with God to bringing things down to having almost like a conversation with each other. And really what's happening here is the direction of our words are shifting from a vertical sphere to a horizontal sphere. Now, this is perfectly normal. If you think about it, in any time we're with a group of people, we are normally conversing or talking. It's actually quite a unique thing to be with a group of people and not having a discussion back and forth with each other, but instead going through God, having that be our primary direction of communication is something that not everybody is really used to. And so it becomes quite easy to kind of fall back into this tendency of getting distracted and kind of bringing things down to our level and conversing. I'm going to talk about why that's not always wrong, but let's stay with why this can be a challenge to maintaining this flow state. Think about it. If we are engaging in this concentrated connection with the Holy Spirit, together we are all connected, speaking to God, praying the things that He's putting on our heart to pray, and then somebody kind of jumps in and begins having almost like a conversation where they're no longer talking to God but to the group, there's something that just switches in the environment. I've been there enough times where I've been able to feel it, where it's like we had this momentum going, the spiritual connection, and it's not that it was ruined, because I don't think conversing with each other is wrong, but it almost was like, okay, I'm not sure if this is exactly like the place that we want to be engaging in the conversation that we're having right now. And so I think there's just an unfamiliarity with maintaining a sustained time of together in a collective group connecting with the Lord. Second thing that I've experienced is specifically in prayer, people's emotional states are triggered at a new level, probably because there is an atmosphere where the Holy Spirit is in the room in a more tangible way. We don't have the distractions of everything else that kind of bombard us and sometimes block out some of those emotions. And so people begin to experience deeper emotional states in times of prayer. And that's a beautiful thing. What some of us tend to do, particularly us that are more pastoral, is as somebody is experiencing that emotional state, our tendency is to want to engage with them through conversation. That tends to be the primary ministry mode that I think we as the church operate in. Oftentimes we go through a process of discussion, hearing what's going on, being able to share insights, to just share empathy and sympathy with people. And then at the end, we usually will tack on a prayer to pray and send them off. Well, in this time of group prayer, I wonder what it would be like for, instead of our first motivation or our first response to be direct conversation with a person, to instead be vertical conversation with God for that person. As we're together in a group, that seems to be the place where we are able to still meet this person's needs, this person that's broken and is praying their heart out to God. We're able to come and surround them in a way that's actually going through God, who is the great comforter, and falling down on that person, and they're experiencing that. And now the third challenge that I've noticed in this dynamic is that people are often just afraid of being misunderstood. And so if you're afraid of being misunderstood, not only do you hesitate to pray some things, but when you do pray, there's oftentimes sort of like a longer backstory that goes along with the prayer. Or if somebody's about to share a prophetic word, there will be a lot of qualifiers of, I'm not sure if this applies, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, judge for yourself. And all of these words that kind of go thrown out into the group have a way of sort of bringing that focus that we were having upward back into that kind of horizontal level again. And so those are three challenges that I've noticed. And now, since we've talked about the challenges, let's take a look at some of the possible solutions to these things. So the first thing I actually want to do is turn to two different scriptures. The first one is found in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 1. It says, "There is an appointed time for everything, and there is a time for every event under heaven." The next is Acts chapter 3, verse 1. And it says, "Now Peter and John were going up to the temple at the 9th hour, the hour of prayer." Why am I bringing out these passages? Well, I think it's important to realize that together, when we assemble for prayer, this is actually like an appointed time for us to connect vertically with God in this collective group. There are so many amazing church activities that involve us directly connecting with each other, that involve us going out and serving others, doing all these different things. But there are these moments where we are called together, and our purpose is not so much to talk to one another, but is to commune with the Lord. And so I want to get in the mindset of really embracing those appointed times when we're together, that is our primary function. That's what we're all about here, is connecting vertically with God, one another in words and songs and everything. Those moments are few and far in between, unfortunately. And so when they come around, I think it's really important that we value those. Now, this is going to mean that we're going to have to shift a little bit how we communicate things in group prayer. Like I said previously with the challenge, that means that we're going to sometimes say things that maybe not everybody understands, and it's not going to be helpful for us to, bring things down and try to give a lengthy backstory of what this meant and what you were trying to say. Or if you're releasing a prophetic word, taking a risk and just throwing it out there without having a lot of qualifiers that follow around it. So that's one of the ways that I think is a solution to how we can communicate. Another one is that when we're specifically giving prophetic words, because this is where I've noticed it most, we are usually used to giving prophetic words in a horizontal direction, where obviously we're hearing from the Lord, but then we're releasing it horizontally directly to another person, which is an awesome way of giving a prophetic word. But when we're in a prayer gathering, I almost like to envision our prophetic words as like a fountain. Imagine that God is putting something on your heart. He's giving you an image, he's giving you a picture, something prophetic that you want to release to the group. Instead of saying, "Hey everybody, I've got this prophetic word that I want to share," think about doing it like this instead. Think of experiencing what that prophetic word is, and then immediately turning whatever that word was supposed to be into a prayer to God. And I think of it like a fountain because a fountain shoots up in a direction like this, right? That could be like your prophetic word that you are praying back to God. You are shooting it up in this direction. But what ends up happening with a fountain? The water, as it goes up, it spans out and it kind of like trickles down. And that's kind of what it's like in the group. We are experiencing, we are engaging, we are a part of this prophetic word that you're releasing in a place of intercession. And it's actually sprinkling, it's trickling down on the rest of the group. We're being absorbed up in that word with you. I wanted to close out this video with what I think is a pretty important disclaimer. I hope I haven't stirred very many people up too much. I know that this conversation, specifically if you're one who has a challenge, continuing the upward gaze and sustaining that upward momentum of prayer and enjoys the kind of back and forth that happens in a prayer meeting, you might be thinking like, oh, maybe I'm not meant for prayer gatherings anymore. Like, this isn't my thing. I really want to ask just for your grace in this. I'm sharing more of a trajectory that I hope we can all be thinking about rather than like a steadfast rule that we can never talk to each other again in prayer. I honestly don't think that's going to be healthy or good. I believe there are going to be many times where the Lord does bring the conversation down from that upward spot to a horizontal spot. What I am asking is that our first inclination, if we would shift it from taking it to that horizontal space to trying to take it vertical. And there's going to be times where the Lord's like, nope, this is something that we need to address together. We need you guys talking and discussing. And when that happens, I embrace that. I want all of us to embrace that. Everyone who's a part of that group prayer experience, I want them to be a part of that. So I really wanted to hammer home that this is not a rule. This is more of a trajectory that I think would be really good for us to aim towards. The second thing, and this applies specifically to that person I was just referring to who might be a little stirred up with this teaching and specifically how they might not feel like they fit in this. Please, this is not a time to act in a place of timidity or fear. The thing that would be worst in this situation would be like, oh man, I oftentimes bring it down to this horizontal level when, we're supposed to be sustaining this upward level. I'm just not going to say anything. I'm not even going to pray. It's too risky. No, that's not what we're about. We want to take risks. We want to go for it. We want to continue to try this out. So I am asking just for grace in this process for myself, for everybody that's going to be a part of group prayer, because I think it's really worth putting ourselves out there in this way. Remembering that this upward momentum that I'm talking about is not a steadfast rule, but is really just embracing the season of our attention being focused off of the things of the world, even off of conversation with each other, and directed towards conversation directly with the Lord.